All right, here's the third and last lesson of Unit 6, the United States in World War I, the Treaty of Versailles and the Treaty of Versailles controversy. There's your left side snap chart. There is a great deal of idealism here with Mr. Woodrow Wilson. Remember, he's a progressive president, and he feels the United States has a place in the world to make it a better place, a war to end all wars, and a war to protect, to preserve, and expand democracy. Armistice Day again comes on 11/11/1918. Americans rejoice. Everyone's skipping work. There's parades in the United States, and of course there are parades in other places around the world too. And it's Wilson's 14-point plan that helps get the Kaiser and the German government to give up. Of course, part of that was, the condition was that the Kaiser abdicate and leave his position of power, and the Germany forms a new government. So that's what he does. He leaves the position of Kaiser, Emperor, and he is gone, and Germany's forming a new government. The goal here in all this is to get this 14-point plan into the peace treaty. He travels to Europe. He's the first president ever to sit around on European soil, and he is treated as if he is the second coming of Christ. The great Messiah has arrived. Huge crowds and huge throngs come to greet him, and he gets this real positive jolt of, yes, this is what I was hoping for. They're going to support me and my efforts here to get everybody on the same page. Right, to get everybody to sing the same tune. This is going to be a success. And so he has high hopes coming in. The key points that you need to kind of summarize and do on the left-hand side of your notebook there for the activity is to kind of match things up to a particular theme. Here are the themes: national self-determination, determination, let people decide how they are governed, and if a large nationality of people wants to be an independent nation, they should be able to be an independent nation without some other country harassing them or preventing it from happening. Economic cooperation, free trade on the high seas, reduce tariffs. This is a big deal for us in the future and for this war. Military reduction, disarmament, territorial change, return lost territory that was lost due to aggression in any particular war. And of course, the baby, put a star on this, reflected on the right-hand side. The most important of all 14 points for Wilson is this League of Nations, a world peace organization to prevent this from ever happening again. So 27 nations gather at the Versailles Palace outside of Paris, and the message of Wilson to the other big four leaders, Britain, France, Italy, make sure you know the big four in the United States at that time, is to go easy on Germany and Austria-Hungary. If we're too harsh, there will only be a victory, but there will be no lasting peace. There's going to be a punishment, and it's going to result in another war. This is his prediction. He literally predicts that within another generation, if we don't do this, it's going to happen, another war, and of course it does. Wilson's problems are, one, he had no real plan to help create new democratic governments in Europe. And the other part of the problem was that there were secret agreements during the war between the British and the French as to what was going to be done before the war even concluded. They were going to divide up Germany's colonies, take territory away, and their response to Wilson's plan is a big Mr. Yuckface. They're not really interested in that for the most part. Meanwhile, as this meeting is going to go on, these negotiations are going to go on, the Russians aren't going to be there, and there is a civil war still being waged there. In World War I, Allied forces, United States forces, British, French forces were sent to Russia, invaded from the south, invaded from the north to try and put down the Bolsheviks, and were supportive of the whites, the pro-democracy, the pro-West forces that were waging war against each other, against the Reds, the Bolsheviks in Russia, right? And so this is what's going on at the same time. But when World War I ends, the forces get pulled out. People are really tired of the war, and Russia is left to fend for itself, and Russia becomes communist, right? So interesting little thought. What would happen if the Western powers had continued to exert more force in Russia? How would things be different? Hard to say, but an interesting thought. Germany's colonies are given to France and Britain with League of Nations supervision. In the end of the treaty here, you can see which ones were lost. The Treaty of Versailles is going to shrink Germany and Austro-Hungary by about a third. You can see how big Germany is compared to the United States and just the northeastern part of the United States. Notice that the countries here that are being formed are there, located off to along the side here, on the right-hand side in the east. That's going to be a little bit of a map activity. One of the most important parts of it here is that parts of Germany are no longer able to be militarized or have forts in them. This is the region of the Rhine River Valley. It is going to have French military forces there. It's going to act as a buffer zone in case Germany seems to think about attacking Russia or France again. They'll have to fight here as opposed to here, and they can destroy their own land. Now, the Rhineland is the cultural heartland of Germany. German culture is incredibly important for economic purposes. You can see here what Germany loses overall, but the Rhineland, in terms of coal and agriculture and industrial resources, really important. Article 231 is also a hard thing to accept in the war, and that is a provision in the Treaty of Versailles that said, Germany, it's your fault. It's our fault for the losses and damages here in this war. No one else's. And that is going to be used in the future by radical elements, the fascists, right, coming forth in the next 2 decades. Germany's World War I debt is huge, but it becomes even bigger, unbelievably bigger, because the reparations aspect of the treaty requires them to pay physical damage, the war loans of the Allied countries. They are broke. They have lost territory. They have lost resources. How can they be financially successful in this particular condition? Not to mention the tens of millions of people that have died throughout the war. Millions and millions of Germans and Austro-Hungarians are dead, young, working people. And that is money also. That is economic productivity that just is not there anymore. And so Germany is in a dire situation. Without this becomes worse in the after-war time period. Their inability to pay the reparations are going to cause tensions in the world. This involved paying the pensions of the widows and the orphans of lost soldiers, hospitalization costs, things like that. Their military is forced to disarm. They go from an army of millions to just an army of 100,000. And this is a society and a country that is both Austro-Hungary and Germany were very militaristic, and to serve in the military was a position of status, and large numbers of men no longer have status. This is going to be hard to take as well. So they're going to go from the most powerful land force really on the planet to an army on the planet to basically nothing weakly, and this is going to be a very irritating thing, right? So in the United States, there's opposition to all of these key points of the Treaty of Versailles. Wilson can't really get rid of these, and was not able to eliminate these harsh pow-pows that I just went over in the Treaty of Versailles. And when he brings it home, Americans aren't happy with it either. There's concern that League membership could draw us into another war. We'll be in European affairs permanently. And we want to go back to normal. We want to isolate. In fact, back to normalcy is going to be the campaign slogan of the Republicans in 1920. We'll talk about that in the next unit. Right? So when he comes back, the Republicans, important to remember who's a Democrat and who's a Republican, especially with our presidents. Wilson's a Democrat. He's coming over on the George Washington, right? Vote of George Washington, isolationism, and W.W. Woodrow Wilson. He's got his draft of the League of Nations, and he has the Treaty of Versailles in there, and the Republicans are pretty hostile to that. And when we bring a treaty to be approved to the United States between other countries, it has to go, of course, to the United States Senate. The President can draw it up or bring a copy of it over, but it doesn't go into effect until the United States Senate approves it. And so he does that, but of course the public has to be happy with it as well. The Republicans are dominated by, the Senate is dominated by Republicans. And there are two groups of Republicans. There are irreconcilables who say there isn't anything about this we like. You can't put chocolate on it. You can't put sugar on it. You can't put nuts, strawberries on it. We just no to the whole treaty. There were some reservations who said, well, maybe we could talk about it and discuss it if there were some changes to it, right? But by and large, the resistance here is big because we have a Democrat versus the Republicans in this, and partisanship kind of rears its head after the war, when it was put on a hold here for a while during the war. The biggest enemy of Wilson in the Senate is a guy that was in charge of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. His name was Henry Cabot Lodge. And he tried to amend or change some of the parts of the treaty and what was known as the Lodge Amendments. He would have been one of the reservationists, and he presents his own changes. It gets presented and voted on in Congress, but Wilson didn't like it because he thought it changed the spirit of the treaty and the League of Nations, and he encouraged Democrats to vote against it. It gets run through the ringer in committees and discussions again, and it gets presented again into the Senate, and it is going to be rejected again. One of the concerns here was that the inclusion of the United States into the League of Nations, which is a Woodrow Wilson idea, would result in, as Lodge said there in red, troops and ships being ordered to any part of the world at any time. This was dangerous. Well, what is it in there that would result in that? The key thing you really have to know in this, one of your top 5 terms for the lesson, is Article 10. A contract. Covenants are contracts. The contract of the members of the League of Nations said this. You get to work. The members of the League undertake to respect and preserve, as against external aggression, the territorial integrity and existing political independence of all members of the League. In case of any such aggression, or in case of any threat or danger of such aggression, the Council shall advise upon the means by which this obligation shall be fulfilled. I have who in red there, and I've got what in green there, and a little bit of how and why, right? In orange, obligation, it is required. This is going to be too much for the dove, peace doves in the United States who want peace, normalcy peace. They don't want any part of the League of Nations. It's too big of a branch. I guess this may be a huge olive branch, right? To swallow. They argued, the Republicans and people concerned about getting into another war argued that this is the same as the alliance system. It is collective security. This is really important because it exists with NATO today, which was formed after World War II, right? This would essentially set up what was set up before the war. And so Republicans and people who are concerned about being isolated and getting into another war would say, this is crazy, we're setting ourselves up to get into another war. This is the same as this. And so Wilson has a difficult time in Congress getting this to pass, so he gets on a train and he travels across the country to sell it to the American people, to get them to pressure their congressmen and especially senators to pass this treaty, right? He's on tour and he's pretty much done with it, and he exhausts himself in the effort, and he suffers a stroke. He's partially paralyzed, too weak to really keep arguing for the treaty. Congress and Lodge kind of take over. His wife, First Lady Edith Wilson, is understood to have perhaps signed a good number of documents for him during this period of time in his last months in office. And the treaty is rejected by the United States Senate. Again, it was run through a vote about twice, and it's rejected both times. And so the keystone, right, the United States, the League of Nations, and the key, which is the United States, the original idea coming from there, Woodrow Wilson, though, is just not there. So for that reason, the League of Nations is going to be very weak. It doesn't have a lot of teeth to enforce peace, although in the document you read with Woodrow Wilson, you can kind of see what they are all pledging to do. But the League of Nations doesn't have a lot of power to enforce decisions in all of this. And in the end, the United States signs a separate treaty with each central power. The lasting effects of Versailles are on the German people. They're going to live some of the poorest conditions imaginable in the 1920s. They're going to try to set up a new system of government. They're also going to have several countries formed out of them. There are going to be Germans living in foreign countries surrounding them. Some of the new countries you'll see in the map book that you'll read. The United States is going to go on its isolationist focus again, and will plan to stay out of European business, political affairs. But again, the League of Nations is too weak. Germany is going to try to establish a democratic government. It's going to be known as the Weimar Republic, but they have a very hard time doing that. It's something that they weren't used to and with bad economics. Governments that have bad economic situations are very unstable. It's a bad combination to set up a new system of government with a really horrific economy and horrific reparations to pay back loans and expenses to the Allies. There's the new nations that are formed. Some of them they're going to struggle to form. These new nations are going to struggle to form and stabilize themselves as well. They're going to be vulnerable to future aggression from other countries who lost the territory, namely Germany and Austro-Hungary. Keep in mind the Soviet Union, which is going to be formed here in 1919. Here's the Red Scare beginning, is the real Red Scare beginning, had lost this territory right here to the formation of these countries. Guess who's part of the start of World War II in 1939, you remember from world history? Both countries invade and take over and gobble up Poland within a matter of weeks. There's your left-hand side, a little bit of a chart. Check the home moving for other left side work. Good day. Keep making hay.